Donald Trump intensifying his violent rhetoric. Surprise, seemingly threatening a, quote, bloodbath if he doesn't win in 2024, while dehumanizing immigrants and embracing the terrorists who tried to topple the government on January 6th. And that was just one weekend, the first full weekend since the general election matchup became official. And it all happened in the course of a single campaign rally. Here's Trump in Ohio.
We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars if I get elected. Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath for the whole. That's going to be the least of it. It's going to be a bloodbath for the country. That'll be the least of it. But they're not going to sell those cars.
Trump's bloodbath comment comes amid a campaign in which he's vowed to be a, quote, dictator, to target rivals and to seek, quote, retribution, which is why his critics are skeptical of the campaign's cleanup effort, claiming Trump was just trying to say, quote, Biden's policies would create an economic bloodbath for the auto industry and auto workers. But no one believes that. The campaign is forced to respond because the bloodbath comments are a big front page story in newspapers and a lead story on major newscasts.
Trump's campaign now on the defensive, warning while discussing the economy that there would be a, quote, bloodbath if he is not reelected in November.
Unhinged rally in Ohio. For an hour and a half, he delivered bizarre, rambling remarks, parroting language used by Adolf Hitler.
He knew what he was doing. We're not stupid. Americans aren't stupid. He was talking about a bloodbath. Sometimes a bloodbath means a bloodbath.
The rally started with a different, bizarre, and troubling scene in which Trump saluted convicted January 6th rioters before calling them, quote, hostages.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the horribly and unfairly treated January 6th hostages.
You see the spirit from the hostages, and that's what they are, as hostages. They've been treated terribly and very unfairly, and you know that, and everybody knows that. And we're going to be working on that soon as the first day we get into office. We're going to save our country.
Trump embracing the terrorists while finding a new toxic, racist way to attack immigrants and singing off key. Recall, he's ranted during the campaign about, quote, vermin who are poisoning the blood of the country, language which historians point out echoes Nazi rhetoric. In his new attack, he calls immigrants, quote, animals who are not people.
I would do the same thing if I had prisons that were teeming with MS-13 and all sorts of people that they've got to take care of for the next 50 years, right? Young people, they're in jail for years, if you call them people. I don't know if you call them people. In some cases, they're not people, in my opinion. These are bad. These are animals.
It's vile, it's anti-democratic, and it's out in the open as Trump tries to get a second term through racist appeals and violent threats. Joining me now to discuss is Brittany Cooper, professor of gender studies and African American and Africana studies with Rutgers University, and Fernand Armandi, Democratic strategist and pollster and MSNBC political analyst. Brittany Cooper, thank you so much for being here tonight. I have to start with this because I think this is really important. I don't talk about Trump being a racist. We know that, right? That's not shocking. But I do think his use of violent rhetoric is important. And I want to ask you, when you hear him say terms like bloodbath, it's similar to, you know, if you hear Jeffrey Dahmer say, hey, I'm going to eat you alive on the basketball court. It's not a metaphor, right? So when you have Donald Trump, who has talked about and encouraged violence, saying there will be a bloodbath if I'm not elected, it's not metaphorical, right?
Right. That's part of the problem. So when those who are his supporters hear him, they empty out the rhetoric to tell themselves that he's just speaking in hyperbole. But what we know is that this is a man who has already fomented insurrection, and he is boldly fomenting insurrection again. He is setting the very same conditions that he set for January 6th so that we will have more violence. And he is also creating a context where these folks feel like they are victims, feel like their grievance is relevant and should be adjudicated, apparently in the form of violence, so that they then feel endlessly justified. But the question that I have is, why do we have a significant swath of the country that is so ready to give the democracy away for a man who is a, criminal, has been civilly held liable for rape? He's a terrible businessman. We now understand that so much of the money that he claims to have made, he made it through fraud. He doesn't believe in democratic processes. And yet they claim they're taking the country back, but really they are hell-bent on giving away anything that we have fought for as a country, anything that we have fought for as an expansive view of democracy. And I think that we've got to ask, what is appealing about a dictator to people who very much believe in democratic processes?
Fernand, I'll take this question to you because, frankly, Brittany is probably a lot more optimistic than me because I think there's a large swath of Americans who don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in the democratic project if anybody other than white straight people gets to participate. My question for you, Fernand, as a pollster is, are these types of rallies, is this kind of rhetoric, is it actually breaking through to anything other than the MAGA base? We're constantly hearing nonsense from non-qualified, non-trained people that black folks and Latinos are suddenly rushing to the Republican Party, even though there's no data and evidence to show it. Does this rhetoric help? Does your polling show that when he calls people vermin and says there's going to be a bloodbath after November if he doesn't win, is there somebody who's hearing that and saying, yeah, I think I'm going to vote for Trump more now?
Well, I mean, to your question, I think the polling does speak to the fact that there are large swaths of Americans that are just completely tuned out to anything that has to do with this campaign, this election, this back and forth. And that's the most terrifying thing, Jason, because as I conduct focus groups constantly, one of the refrains I keep hearing over and over again, and to me, this is the nightmare scenario, what I'm about to tell you in America right now. I hear this in every single group among several participants. And what they say is, yeah, Trump is out there. I don't like him. He says really bad things. But truth of the matter is, things didn't cost as much when he was president, and I was doing better economically. So the idea that there is this normalization, the banality of WTF, as I like to say, when it comes to Trump, it doesn't really penetrate as much anymore. And part of that is because of the normalization that, I hate to say it, a lot of folks in the media are doing, treating this like a horse race coverage between two candidates running for president, when the truth of the matter is Donald Trump is more dangerous today than at any point in his life. Much more dangerous now than when he was president, because during that first term, Jason, there were at least some safeguards around him that we saw, and folks came out and tried to stop him. Now he doesn't feel he has any accountability. He can say whatever he wants. He does. What's he going to say next? That he's going to be a dictator on day one? Wait a minute. He said that too. So that is why the stakes are so scary. And finally, the polling shows that not only is he more dangerous than ever, he is very credible as a candidate that can win in November, Jason.
And that's the terrible part. I want to play this soundbite to you, Brittany. This is Howie Kurtz talking to Trump about the kind of language he uses, and get your thoughts on the other side.
Why do you use words like vermin and poisoning of the blood? The press, as you know, immediately reacts to that by saying, well, that's the kind of language that Hitler and Mussolini used.
Well, that's what they say. I didn't know that, but that's what they say. Because our country is being poisoned.
So, Brittany, look, I can say to 100 people right now, hey, that's what Hitler said, and they're not going to care one way or another, right? Because to them, this is all theoretical and abstract. But I think to Fernand's point, why are we not hearing more, not just from the press, but from the Democratic Party? Why do we not hear elected officials? Why do we not hear more retired generals? Why do we not hear so many more pundits coming out and screaming saying, hey, nobody should talk like this and still be running for president? That's my question for you, Brittany.
Listen, the thing that was most compelling about that clip is the moment where he says, I didn't know that they said that, because white supremacy is a logic. It isn't rooted in any one person. White supremacy dehumanizes groups of people. It is based on this idea of the purity and supremacy of whiteness. But the thing is, Jason, folks don't know that if you live in a country that is banning books, that is banning the proper teaching of history, that is banning the teaching of civics. People don't have any way to fully contextualize the threat of Trump. And many Americans Americans feel like we are insulated from the ability of fascism to actually show up on our shores and erode whatever democratic project or semblance of it that we have left that we've been trying to engage in. But the other side of this is that the one party that we have right now that is at some level defending democracy, we can't have President Biden using terms like illegals, even as a gaffe in, in the State of the Union address, because that means that that's sort of his impulse is to think of them as illegal, and he has to then do a thing to get to the other side of it. The other thing about this is that we've got, as a country, to do a better job of contextualizing where we were with Trump. Things were not better. We were locked down in the house for years because this man mismanaged a pandemic for 9 months and told us that we could use general household disinfectant to treat something that we've now lost over 1 million Americans for. That's not a country that's doing better, right? We weren't doing better economically. People struggled during that time. And so we have to become more empathetic and say, groceries are high, gas is high, but people are working. And the same things that drove us to the polls in 2020 to reject this fascist project have to continue to drive us. We have to continue to be vigilant. If we don't, he is playbooking for us. He is giving us the playbook of who he's going to come after. He's going to come after immigrants. He's going to come after people of color. He was locking babies in cages as a matter of formal policy. He banned Muslim folks in this country as his first act as president. He will do that, and he will do even more. This is a man who likes words like poison, like American carnage, like bloodbath. Those are not metaphors. That is the intellectual and ideological universe in which he lives, one of violence, one of decay, one of death, and that is what he hopes to produce.